They said he bought pigs that afternoon. What no one expected was that he would walk away with a life chained to his silence. And in the dust behind Dry Creek Junction, where men traded animals and misery with the same careless hands, a single choice was about to undo two broken souls. Buy 2 pigs, get an Apache slave for free. The words floated over the freight yard like a cruel joke, carried on heat and laughter. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The yard behind Dry Creek Junction lay under a tired late afternoon sun, its boards bleached from weeks without rain, its fences leaning from years of hard use. Dust drifted through the air, bitter on the tongue, mixing with the squeals of pigs, the snorts of horses, and the low, careless talk of men who had grown used to noise, drowning out conscience. William Carter rode in at an unhurried pace, guiding his horse the way a man does when he doesn't wish to be noticed. He tied the reins to a low rail and stepped down, shoulders easy, face unreadable. For nearly 8 years, William had lived alone on a ranch miles from town, fixing fences, tending cattle, and keeping distance from anything that might pull him back into arguments he had buried with the family homestead he'd left behind. He came into town only when supplies ran too thin to ignore. Today, he needed 2 pigs to replace the ones he'd lost to a winter sickness. The livestock trader stood beside the pen, a worn-looking man with a cracked voice and eyes that suggested he enjoyed cheap amusement more than honest work. He called out to the small crowd, $3 for both, and hell, I'll sweeten it. Take the pigs, and take the Apache girl too. Murmurs rippled through the men. Some laughed. Others leaned for a better look at the woman, chained behind the post. She stood barefoot on the cold dirt, ankles stiff from hours without movement. Torn cloth barely held to her body, and her hair had become a heavy, tangled curtain from days of neglect. Small tremors ran through her frame as she fought to stay upright. Her name was Nia, though no one there knew it. Months earlier, she had been taken during a raid, passed from one set of hands to another, her existence reduced to something men used to bargain. She had stopped speaking after the second unfamiliar settlement, learning that silence sometimes kept pain delayed. She watched faces instead of listening to words, hunting for any hint of safety. When laughter broke out, her stomach drew tight. She kept her eyes on the ground, knowing even a glance could invite trouble. Her throat burned with thirst as she braced for another night chained in the open. William approached the pen without comment. He didn't react to the jokes. His attention moved from the pigs to the trader, and finally to the young woman behind the post. His eyes settled on her hands. Dark rope marks circled her wrists, dried blood tracing their edges. He noticed the shallow, controlled rise of her chest as she tried to calm herself. The trader smirked. "Carter, you're in luck. I'm giving her away. Eats almost nothing. Works slow. Only causes trouble by breathing. Take her and save me the bother." William kept his voice level. $3 for the pigs. That's the price. You said she comes free. The trader repeated it, waiting for amusement. William reached into his coat, placed the coins into the man's hand. His fingers were steady. His face didn't change. "Cut her loose." The yard went quiet. A few men traded uncertain looks. William didn't move. After a moment, the trader shrugged and stepped forward, tugging at the knot. The rope gave way. The chain clattered against the post. Freed Nia staggered and nearly fell. William took one step closer, ready to catch her, but stopped short, leaving space. "Wagon," he said softly, nodding. Nia lifted her head a fraction. She studied him in quick, frightened glances, searching his expression for intention. She found no smirk, no demand, no impatience. She took one small step, then another, forcing her legs to obey. The crowd watched, disappointed the joke had ended without spectacle. William ignored them. He loaded the pigs into the wagon crate, secured the latch. Nia sat on the wagon bed, pulling her knees close, wrists tucked out of sight. William took a folded wool blanket from beneath the seat and held it toward her. "A cold on the ride?" She hesitated. The last offered kindness had ended badly. Her fingers twitched before she accepted it, gripping it as if it might vanish. William mounted his horse and led the wagon from the yard. Voices faded behind them as they followed the trail out of town. The wheels rolled through dry grass. stirring pale dust that settled quickly in the cooling air. Nia stayed silent, her thoughts restless. She wondered why he hadn't tied her. She wondered if he meant to trade her again. She watched his back, noting how he sat straight but without tension. There was no hunger in his movements, no restless eagerness. She didn't trust the calm, but it eased her breathing. William kept the pace slow. He hadn't planned anything beyond not leaving her there. The choice had lodged in his chest before he'd given it thought. He didn't intend to hurt her. He didn't intend to own her. He simply hadn't been able to ride away. When the ranch came into view, the sun hung low over distant hills. The buildings rested quiet, a faint trace of smoke rising from a morning fire long gone. Nia's hands tightened on the blanket. She couldn't tell if she'd arrived at safety or another unknown cage. William dismounted and walked toward a small shed beside the cabin. Inside, a metal basin sat on a table. He had warmed water earlier for tools, and some heat remained. He lit a lantern, hung it, and turned back. "You can wash here." "I'll wait outside." Nia didn't move at first. She stared at the basin, then at him. When no threat followed, she stepped in slowly. William closed the door most of the way, leaving a narrow opening. He leaned against the porch rail and waited. Inside, Nia dipped her hands into the warm water. The heat stung. Dirt bled from her skin in dark ribbons. For the first time in months, something like relief touched her. Outside, William watched the last light settle. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. Only that the image of her chained in that yard had decided for him. Inside, Nia wondered if this quiet man might be the first in a long time who didn't see her as something to command. Twilight faded as William carried wood to the cabin. The air had cooled enough that each breath showed. He set the stack down and glanced toward the shed. He didn't call out. He didn't hurry her. Inside, Nia rinsed the last grime from her arms. The warmth felt strange on clean skin. She used a worn cloth left on the table to dry herself. Her hair hung wet down her back. A folded grey dress lay on a chair. She hesitated, then slipped it on, surprised by intact fabric. Outside, William turned when the door shifted. Nia stepped out slowly, hair dark and wet, hands near her sides. "You'll want the fire," he said. "Nights fall cold." She looked from the cabin to him. He stepped back and gestured. Inside, the cabin glowed small but warm. A low fire breathed in the hearth. Tools hung neat. A table stood ready. She searched instinctively for restraints and found none. "I made stew earlier," William said, filling a tin bowl. "It's not much, but it's warm." She didn't approach. Hunger tightened her stomach, but habit held her still. He placed the bowl and stepped away. After a long pause, she sat at the far end of the bench. Her hands trembled as she lifted the spoon. The first bite made her close her eyes. William watched without staring. He removed his boots and sat near the fire. When she finally looked up, her voice was low. "Why did you take me?" He met her eyes. "Because leaving you there didn't—" "Sit right with me." She searched his face for more and found none. "What do you expect from me?" "Nothing tonight. You're tired. You can rest." He folded a blanket near the fire. "You'll sleep here. Warmest place. I'll use the cot." Her heartbeat quickened. He moved himself instead of her. "You don't need to fear me," he said simply. Fear didn't vanish, but something loosened. She nodded once. William stepped out briefly for more wood. When he returned, she sat by the fire, blanket around her legs. "If you want water, there's a bucket by the table." She inclined her head. The cabin settled into quiet. William mended a latch. Nia watched without seeming to. He didn't rush. He didn't close distance. When he finished, he said, "I'm turning in. If you need anything, say so." She waited until he lay down before easing onto her side, facing the fire. Sleep came slowly, but it came without hands on her wrists. Across the room, William stared at the ceiling before closing his eyes. Knowing nothing about tomorrow but certain about today, morning light filtered grey through the window. William added wood to the fire. The sound woke Nia. She sat up quickly. "It's morning," he said. "I'm making coffee." She took in the unchanged room. No ropes, no locks. He poured water, stirred cornmeal. "I'll make porridge." "It fills you." She wrapped the blanket tighter and sat near the fire. "If you're cold, the shed still has warm water. You can wash again." She studied him. Then quietly, "What do you want from me?" He leaned against the counter. "Nothing you're not ready to give. You can stay until you decide otherwise." She looked down at her wrists, rubbed them gently. When the porridge was done, he set a bowl on the table. "Eat if you want. I'll check the livestock." She hesitated, fear shifting shape. "Door won't be locked," he added. "You can walk outside. Just stay clear of the far ridge. Coyotes." He stepped out. She watched him cross the yard and tend the pigs. No glances back. Inside, she approached the bowl. Steam warmed her face. She ate. When he returned, he said, "I'm fixing a loose rail by the corral. You can rest. You won't be punished for being outside." The words struck deeper than he knew. She moved to the doorway and watched him work. After several minutes, she stepped out into the yard. The cabin behind her, the land opening wide. She scanned the horizon, distance frightening and soothing all at once. She drew her arms around herself and breathed. William noticed her then. William paused mid-swing when he felt it did the subtle shift of being, watched not with fear alone, but with something quieter. He turned and saw Nia standing near the edge of the yard, the morning light touching her face gently. No chains at her wrists, no dust in her hair. For a moment neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the grass. A bird lifted from the fence rail. Life ordinary and unremarkable continued. William rested the hammer against the post and said only, "You don't have to stay." "But you can." Nia studied the open land, then the small cabin, then the man who had asked nothing of her. Slowly, almost uncertain of her own decision, she stepped closer. Not close enough to touch, close enough to choose. "I don't know where to go," she said. The words felt fragile, like something newly owned. William nodded once. "Then stay until you do." That was all. No promise, no claim, just space. Nia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The yard no longer felt like a boundary. It felt like a beginning, and as the sun climbed over the hills, two lives, once defined by absence and captivity, stood quietly in the open, neither owned, neither alone, both finally facing a future that had not been written for them.